know when you're ready, Tina. We're good here.
Yeah, I think we're all set to go. I'll let other people in as they come in.
So are we going to start introductions with the board and then, or with others? There's
Yeah,
somebody.
why don't we go through and do introductions, and then I will call on people that have signed in, and we'll go from there.
Okay, we might as well start with Cliff. He's alphabetically correct.
That's right. Cliff Eichinger, board member.
Pam?
Hi, Pam Skinner, board member.
Diane?
Hi, Diane Ward, board member.
Oh, Larry?
Larry Swope, board member.
Marge Evansteiner, board chair. Okay, Tina, who have we got out there?
Yeah, I'll go through the rest of the list. I'm Tina Carsons. I'm the administrator at the Watershed District. Nicole?
I'm Nicole Soderholm, the permit coordinator for the watershed.
And Paige?
Hi, I'm Paige Alberg, project manager for the Watershed District.
And Brad?
Brad Lindemann, I'm with Bar Engineering Company. We are the Watershed District engineers.
And good ones.
Thank you.
I'm Tyler. I'm also with Bar Engineering.
Tracy?
Tracy Gallowitz, I'm the attorney for the district.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Marge. It's nice to hear you.
And Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Bartoja. I'm the Natural Resources Specialist with the Watershed.
And then for visitors that are on here today, I'm just going to call on you, and if you would just say who you are, where you live, or if you're associated with a permit, or if there's any other reason why you're on our call tonight, you can just let us know. And then if you're interested in giving comments during our visitor comments, let me know, and I'll write you down for that too. I'll start with, it says John's iPad. Oh, you're muted, John.
So John's last name is iPad?
Let me see. Oh, it's not letting me unmute you, John.
Come back to John.
Okay. Connie Meyer.
There
Oh,
we
there's
go.
John.
Is that okay?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, yep, John Pound, B-O-U-N-D.
And you were here for permits, correct?
I'm here for permits for both Myers and Deuce permits, correct?
Okay, thanks, John. It says Connie Meyer. Oh, and you're muted too. Sorry. To unmute.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go.
We're Connie and Jeff Meyer. We're with John Pound, and we are the property when the property is asking for a variance, and we would like to speak when visitors can speak.
Okay, thank you.
And Tina, what's our time limit on speaking so everybody knows?
For our visitor comments, we have 4 minutes per speaker.
Okay.
Then I have a Melissa.
Hi, Melissa Deuce. I'm also an applicant for a permit this evening, also asking for a variance.
Okay, thank you. And Melissa Elke, or Elk?
Elke is correct.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Melissa Elke. I'm with the Twin Lake Association. And I would like to speak during the visitor comments.
Okay, thank you. And then there's somebody on the phone. Is that one of our, it's a 612 number? Okay. All right, I don't know who that is, but I think we're good to go then, Marge.
All right. Is everybody ready? Because we're going to be starting soon. Absent a gavel, this is a call to order. Next is the approval of the agenda.
Just a reminder, before we approve the agenda, if there's anything you want pulled off of the consent, you would do that right now during this time.
All right. I'll move approval of agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor of approval?
We'll do a roll call vote.
Roll call.
Larry?
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
and Marge.
Aye. Next, the consent agenda. And again, just a reminder, that includes everything up to item 4.
Right.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion?
I would like to discuss one thing on the agenda.
We're bit, okay.
That's, well, two things actually. Changed order number 4. That is work that's being done under the current CIP. Do we have a process in place, or can we have a process in place to make it a lot easier for our field employees like Dave Lassen to get contractors to do work that needs to be done without having to have all this documentation and bring it back to the board every time?
Are you referring to something further on the agenda, or?
No, I'm referring to change order 4 that's on the agenda.
Oh, okay. So we would have had to pull that off. So that's on the consent, and that didn't get pulled off. Tracy, I don't know how we.
Well, but don't we have the opportunity to discuss these things and still approve them? I'm not asking it not to be approved.
Oh, okay.
Something about
So, well, yeah. So in order, well, technically to have discussion on the item, we would pull it off the consent and have that discussion. But if you're just asking generally,
yes.
Tracy, good.
I'm comfortable if we just have this as discussion item, but if you don't want it approved in bulk with the rest, we should make a motion, a friendly amendment to the motion to see if this can be removed.
No, I
from the
wanted to
consent
approve
agenda.
the rest, and
okay,
looking for a process to do that. I'm okay.
I think
it off if that's what we have to do.
No, I think I can just answer your question real quick. I mean, so the work has been done. So the process is fairly easy. It's that Dave gives them the okay to do the work, and then the payment, the change in payment comes before the board for approval. Any change orders to that contract have to come before the board. But that was a staff, you know, Dave was able to have that work done already. So it wasn't waiting to be done. It was done already.
Yeah.
It was waiting to be paid, correct?
Correct.
It's a change to the contract, so we have to, am I muted? Oh, change to the contract, so we have to have a board action on it.
Kind of where I'm wondering and have the board think about, or Tina to think about, or somebody, is a process where it's a little easier to empower Dave to get things done rather than to have to go through a really formal process on everything that has to be done, like give him a budget so that he can do things that he sees needs to be done that aren't always necessarily connected to the CIP. That's more my point, is that.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure that there are a lot of barriers to that.
No.
It is a pretty fluid.
Okay, so he can.
I mean, he clears things with me, you know,
Right.
he's telling people to do, our contractors to do work, and he works with bar staff just to verify that the work he's requesting is a good idea and good decision.
Right.
But there really aren't a lot of, you know, if something needs to get done, it gets done.
Okay.
I think,
all right.
Larry, too, we like to have this documented. So, you know, it's an expansion of scope. And if there would be a problem, you know, heaven forbid somebody would get hurt, or there would be an insurance type issue with this expanded scope, then it ties it directly to those requirements that are under the current contract. You know, otherwise we have some assumptions that are made outside of that. And I agree, it seems kind of clumsy to go through this, but as Tina suggested or offered, we oftentimes give the contractor a go ahead to do this, and you'll see the language in that change order. They completed this in good faith. Basically, we've talked it through, and we both have the agreement that it's going to be part of the contract. But I think from an insurance standpoint, and maybe Tracy, you might have some comments there as well, just to further protect the district in case something would happen.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
All right, back to the consent agenda. We had, I believe, a motion and a second.
Yes, that's correct.
Should we do a discussion? And then let's take a roll call vote, Tina.
Okay, Larry,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
and Marge.
Aye. Visitors' comments. Who do we have up first?
So I think Connie and Jeff had indicated that they would like to make a comment.
They look so comfortable on their couch, don't they?
Yes. So if you guys want to unmute, you have 4 minutes to give your comments to the board.
So we've lived on Lake Owasso since 1992, so for the past 28 years. And we initially with our lakeshore, we attempted to follow DNR guidelines and do natural plantings to protect the lakeshore. And they have failed miserably in the last several years with the increasing wakeboards. And each year on Owasso, there's been a greater number of them. They are just pounding the shores. We planted arborvitae in 2010 along our lakeshore, and we very carefully measured them 4 feet apart. And we went out, we have lost 2 of them. So we have lost well over 4 feet of lakeshore since 2010.
They've fallen into the lake.
They literally have fallen into the lake. And in our variants, John has shown a really funny looking structure going that's just being held up by blocks. That entire structure was on Lake Bank that has gotten eroded away into the water. What we're asking for is that what we're aware of is our attempt to do the project is really about trying to protect the lakeshore, that the fill is going into the lakeshore at a remarkably increasing rate. Every year there's more of the wakeboards and more of our lakeshore is eroding away. And so our desire is actually to protect the lake and keep more. The lake is filling with our lakeshore, and what we'd like to do is protect and stop that from happening, and be able to, if we're not able to get the variance, the cost increases with how much land we will have to move and how we'll have to change the plan are potentially prohibitive. And so there will be continuing fill, unfortunately, into the lake, but it will be lakeshore and there'll be no sort of end to it until we can find a way to better protect the lakeshore. So that's what we're asking for in the variance, is to help us stop and protect the lake.
Okay, thanks, Connie.
You want to add?
I agree.
Good. So Manager Ebensteiner and the rest of the board, we'll follow up with this in the applications for permits after the visitor comment section.
As I can recall from the pictures, it looks like the work is well needed, and your neighbors have done some sort of bank improvements that look like. Is that true?
The neighbors, yes, to our north,
right,
several years ago did improvements to protect their lakeshore. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, I was just going to call on the next person. Melissa Elke.
Hi, I'm Melissa Elke. I'm the current Vice President of the Twin Lake Association, and I just wanted to come on and reiterate the 3 main priorities that we have for our association. Sorry, I have a baby wandering. Sorry, so our 3 main goals are rerouting West Vadnais to prevent it from feeding into our lake, Twin Lake, correcting our outflow, which seems to be working very well right now. And then our 3rd priority is just ensuring the water quality of our lake. So wanted to just come on and reiterate those 3 priorities for us. And that's all I have.
Great.
And thank you. It's good to see a fresh face. Not the rest of us don't have fresh faces, but this is your first time, right?
I've called in on a couple meetings and I attended a few in person, you know.
Okay.
Before COVID, but I think this is probably my first time with visitor comments. Oh, and I just had a baby fall, so sorry.
Melissa, did you want to speak also?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yep.
I am the property owner to the south, adjacent to the Meyer property, and we've only been here for a little over a year. And I think our application, along with the Myers application, is special in the fact our location on the lake. There is, as I think most of you all know, there's a large deep trench along the west shore of the lake, which really gives the depth allowable for a lot of these wake boats to operate in. So when they're going, you know, virtually up and down the west coastline, because of our proximity to that trench, our properties, you know, all along the west side are really taking the brunt of these significant wave action. So where we've really taken the time to do the research and work with John's company to come up with the form of riprap and to really enforce our lake shore, so we don't see the additional fill, you know, eroding away. We are the applicant with, there's a timber wall right now on our property, and it's failing. It's been there a long time, and it is actually draining the soil from behind the wall. So really looking at all of the properties along the west side of the lake have some sort of riprap, have, you know, very structured seawalls. Our two properties unfortunately do not. And so we'd like to obviously preserve that, and that's why we're here.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Melissa. John, did you want to speak now, or do you want to wait until we give our presentation on the, or discussion on the permit?
I guess can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. To reinforce both of their comments as far as what they have going on at this point, they both got elevations that are adjacent to the lake that are above the 880, I'll call it 889 for round figures for the floodplain. And basically at this point, the Deuce's property, if that timber wall happens to go in, you're going to be losing about 3.5 feet above the 889 floodplain point that will go into the lake. And Myers will probably be losing about 1.5 feet above the floodplain line going into the lake. I took readings from the county park, and the survey crew happened to be out there, so they gave me exact readings. I shot a laser guide back to the lake. As I was driving a stake into the lake, I was actually able to walk on dry ground. The lake happened to be down about 1 foot the day that I happened to be out there. And as I was out there, a ski boat was going by with a wakeboard, and standing out there with my boots on, I had a wave come well over my boots. And I could literally, I've got some pictures of Myers property where the sand is just washing down every time a boat goes by. So that's one of the reasons why we're proposing to do the riprap, as well as a block, or, you know, the boulder type wall in the water depth to try to stabilize the existing bank.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else left, Tina?
That's it for visitor comments.
Moving on to permit program, that would be 2034 and 2035. And
yeah, so, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say this is a nice transition after these folks just talked about their properties, that these two permits are going before you because there's a variance request. So the first permit is 20-34 for 3206 West Owasso Boulevard. This is the Meyer property. You heard from Connie and Jeff. They have kind of explained their situation and included some photos for your review. But where it comes down to the rules is that they would be proposing 38.44 cubic yards of fill below the 100-year floodplain of Lake Owasso. You'll notice staff did not provide a recommendation one way or the other. In the time, at least, that I've been doing permits, there's not a history of approval like this where there are habitable structures on Lake Owasso without adequate freeboard. And I think maybe Brad, you can confirm that there's actually some homes within the floodplain of Lake Owasso in this case.
Yes, that's correct. I don't have the exact count, but yes, there are a number of homes that are currently exist within the floodplain.
So the Myers are requesting the variance for compensatory storage. During the review period, staff did request that they revise their design to meet the rule, but I advised them that it's within their right to come before you to request this variance if that wasn't a path that they wanted to pursue. So I guess staff are looking for a little bit of guidance on how to interpret these particular submittals and then also submittals moving forward. Our floodplain rule as it stands offers no flexibility for compensatory storage. It's either you provide it or it's a variance. So there's not like a minimum amount of fill we would allow by the rule. So I guess I'm just looking for some guidance from the board. I think we all can agree that there's some competing goals here, both of which we care about as a watershed. Erosion into the lake is one for water quality, and also for flood risk and protection of habitable structures. So I'm just, looking for some board discussion and opinions.
What changes? Oh, I'm sorry, Tina, go ahead.
I was just saying that Cliff has his hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering on this particular application of Meyer residence, is all of the fill within the floodplain the riprap that's on the lake side of the big block wall?
It's the riprap in the drawing and then also the boulders. And then there's
part of the
some
boulders.
backfill required, as I understand, to place that riprap.
One of my thoughts on both these permits was that we shouldn't allow the lake side of the boulder wall to be any further into the lake than the current bank. And I think that's really not exceeding what's there currently. There is some obvious excavation that has to be done in order to fit the boulders in. That's why I asked about the riprap, because it seems like the riprap is also contributing to the amount of fill in or underneath in the floodplain area. But I think the riprap is pretty necessary to make this work. I guess I'd like to ask Brad about what he thought of that as well.
Well, to the latter part of your comment, Cliff, I agree. The waves that are produced by the wake surf boats and the wakeboard boats are huge, and it would be a very unique situation where vegetation would hold up long term there. So I think the riprap is necessary. I haven't looked at the design specifically, so I'll ask John. Is that a possibility? Can you, first, do you understand what Manager Eichinger is suggesting, and have you considered that approach, basically cutting back into the bank and having the face of the riprap match essentially where the
face of the boulder
face is at, or the face of the
boulder wall? Yeah.
So basically what I did there was I did the drawing that we submitted, I believe has the from the ordinary high water mark right now. Competing with two different things here, basically the ordinary high water mark as well as the floodplain. And the differentiation, if I recall right, might be about 2.5 or 3 feet, if I recall. I think it's 886 and 880.
2 feet. Yeah.
That 3 feet is the differentiation that's really hard to work. I'm trying to support bank above the ordinary high water mark. At the same point, we're trying to protect the land or the lakeshore below the ordinary high water mark. So if we go follow the DNR guidelines and go a 3-to-1 slope, 6 feet in front of the ordinary high water mark where it exists right now, we still have to support the bank that's there, which means that I'm basically replacing what land was there before by going straight up and down. We would not be going out any further than the existing wall that was there where on the Myers picture, for instance, there's a concrete block wall that's existing. That was their shoreline. And we're not going out any further than that. As a matter of fact, we're going back further than that just to, to create a wall to stop any erosion. I don't know if I'm answering the question that you're.
Well, yeah, I have no objection personally to putting the wall at the location where you were saying the concrete block structure. Basically, that's at the toe of the eroding slope. And for the deuces, if the outside of the boulder wall is where their current timber wall is, basically we're just replacing what's there now. And the riprap is probably fill, but I think the riprap's necessary to stabilize the boulder wall. I guess question for Brad, have you looked at the impact of the 34 and the additional 12 cubic yards of fill to the floodplain? I imagine it's not significant.
Yes, it's very, very small.
Yeah.
Very, very small. So, but what we're struggling with, as Nicole had suggested, with the way the rule is written, there's really no threshold. It's either fill or don't fill. So, I think it makes it even more challenging because we know there are homes in the floodplain, and every incremental amount adds to that risk. So we're kind of challenged by that. The concept that you're suggesting, Cliff, I agree with, but I haven't looked at the plan closely enough to see, if that can be done. But I agree with your approach. Basically, the face of those boulders replacing where the face of what was there before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like the deuces is designed that way.
That is correct.
Yeah, it looks like the Myers, because the banks eroded back a little bit slanted, but the toe where the blocks were, the toe of that slope is, if they match that, I think I would accept that proposal.
What you're suggesting, Cliff, then, if I'm understanding correctly, if it can be shown in that way, then it technically is not a variance. It meets the rule, and how we look at whether this is considered fill in the floodplain or not, rather than a variance.
Yeah, well, technically, I think maybe the riprap results in fill. So I think we'd have to approve the plan, and whatever quote fill is required to do that, I would approve a variance for that. Or I would suggest we approve it.
Tina, any other comments?
Diane has her hand up.
That was just my question, was where you draw the line for if it's fill or not. And if they're losing that much, I think it should not be where it is now. It should be where it was. So maybe we can approve it with a condition that if the riprap requires a little bit of floodplain fill, it will be approved as a variance, and if not, it's not a variance.
I think,
go ahead.
During our review to are you suggesting they cut back into the shoreline to actually create the compensatory storage, or
no?
Are you hoping to quantify what's already been lost from the floodplain? I'm trying to understand how to.
I'm just saying, let's allow them to build the boulder wall at the location of the current conditions. And
which is what's depicted in the board packet, I believe.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the Myers proposal, if that's actually where it is. But if John says it's at the location of the blocks that are at you see the blocks in the picture. If that's the case, then yes, vertically from the base of those blocks, really wouldn't be any further out into the lake than the current condition. So then I don't think it's actually more fill than current conditions. In fact, a few years ago, it used to be out further. So I don't think it's a problem. The riprap probably is a little bit more fill, but I think that's necessary in order to stabilize the bank. And it's definitely a bad situation right now. So I think this is actually improving water quality and stabilizing it for the future. So I think it's it's an improvement.
So do they need a variance or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they probably do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just start with the Myers unless Larry, Diane, Marge, anyone, if there's further comments, or Brad, any last thoughts from you?
Well, one thought that I had, and I think there is some public property on the lake. Has there been any other spots on the lake where you've looked to basically move, create compensatory storage? Have you looked into it further? Even if it's not on the property, we're mainly concerned with balancing that out on Lake Owasso.
Yeah, we certainly don't have any property, obviously, but I'm not sure about the city and county. There's the boat launch. We've talked about it with Snail Lake before, and the county opted not to pursue some extra flood storage at that time. So this would be a separate request. Oh, Pam, yeah, go ahead.
I don't have any problems with this per se. I just would like Tracy's feedback to make sure that we're not setting up precedents for anything unforeseen that could be negative in the future by approving this variance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will set precedents, but I think Cliff, and when you initially began the conversation, said, we're weighing the need and the benefit this provides by these homeowners taking on this private cost of keeping water quality and some of the soils going into the lake and so forth. So in weighing the benefits against the ability to try to have a de minimis impact in the floodplain, I think that if you do pass this and grant this variance, I think that will be what will be weighed in the future. And it's not an unreasonable thing to weigh. If this circumstance comes up along the lake, I don't know that it would be something you deny in the future either. So I think it is precedent setting, but I think if you clearly state the reason why you're granting this variance, and as Cliff's pointed out, if there's some way to make a de minimis impact on the floodplain, that might not even be different than how it was 10 years ago, as the Myers have talked about. I think with that kind of basis in the minutes, it might be easier to distinguish from any other homeowner just seeking to fix a wall that really doesn't need it due to the erosion that's happening here.
Thanks, Tracy.
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Okay, my only comment would be, and it goes back to what Cliff and Diane were talking about, is where we start with time zero. We're looking at impacting the floodplain. Because again, this shore has been eroding regularly. So it's changing conditions, and it looks to me like what they're doing is just taking it back to the way it used to be before speedboats and things started going by and degrading the property. So from that point of view, I think that's one of the things we ought to be taking a look at, is where do we start our time clock looking at how this impacts the floodplain.
Yeah, and I think during the review, we look at existing versus proposed conditions. And since we're not monitoring in real time material that's being lost from the active storage area of the lake, we're looking at existing conditions as right now, and then proposed, and then we look at cut fill, and it's very black and white where there's net fill and where there isn't. So that's how, just to give a little background of how you have been reviewing these in the past.
I understand the need for the variance. I'm just saying, when we're looking at rationalizing these things and understanding how we do variances, I think that's one of the things to take into account.
What we'll have to do, we're going to take 2034 first and then 2035, and we'll need a motion on 2034.
Yes.
I have one other thing I'd like to talk about first before we have a motion and a vote. Under the erosion control provisions, did you give consideration to requiring a silt fence around both, or floating silt curtain in front of both lots? I think that would be a safeguard to the lake. That would be advantageous.
Okay. Yeah, we certainly can add that as a special provision.
Oh, it is? We'll
No,
add
we
it?
can.
No,
Okay.
you add it.
Yeah. In that case, I will move the Meyer permit 2020-34 with the addition of adding the floating silt curtain and the just the notation that the plan should reflect that the boulder wall should not be any further lakeward than the current conditions, which I think Don or John has acknowledged.
We need a second.
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote again.
Yep.
Well,
Larry?
discussion, but I think we've had it. So Tina?
Larry?
Aye.
Diane? Oops, Diane? Oh, you were muted.
He's muted.
Sorry, I was looking down.
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Pam?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
And Marge?
Aye. All right. 2035.
Yeah, so a lot of, the same discussion that we've had. This one, as a reminder, is with the existing timber wall. It's a smaller net fill amount in part because they are removing material as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of the big difference with that, but we can certainly add special provision for silt curtain if that is desired.
Okay, we'll need a motion.
I'll move approval with the addition of the floating silt curtain.
Second?
I would second that with the addition that the same presumption is that Cliff mentioned earlier, that we're not moving the shoreline at all.
Yeah, I
mean,
think the plans are pretty clear in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Second.
Discussion? Okay, Tina, roll call vote.
Yep. Larry?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
And Marge?
Aye. Okay, moving on to the enforcement action report. Is there
Thanks for
anything we really need to, sorry, what?
Telling the Myers and everyone else, thanks for coming tonight, and you're welcome to stay on if you want. So permits and they were approved. So
Thank you very much.
Your
Thank you.
consideration.
Thank you, all of you.
Thanks.
Okay.
One thing of note in the enforcement action report was this was our first staff approved residential permit. Listed at the bottom of the report, Horseshoe Drive, also on Lake Owasso. And again, based on previous month's discussion of single lot permitting, if the applicant was not requesting a variance, the board had elected that staff could approve it. And actually the project's already complete, so.
Good.
Well then, okay. Stewardship grant program. No comments. 7, presentation and action items. Fish
Yes.
Creek.
Tyler, where did Tyler go? There he is. Tyler Olson from Bar Engineering is here tonight. Brad, I don't know if you had any other introduction, but
Yeah, I as Tina mentioned, Tyler's here, and Tyler's been with Bar several years now. He has a background in water quality, surface water quality. Has a master's in water quality as well from worked in St. Anthony Falls, and I believe, Tyler, if this is correct, you did your master's on nutrient cycling in stormwater ponds, so you're really lined up really well for these subwatershed feasibility studies, and been working closely with Aaron Anderson-Wenz on these studies for the past several months, and we're just kind of here. I think Tyler's going to go through these and give you some highlights of the studies. I trust you've read through them, and you know, then this kind of folds into, I think, the prioritization memo as well, because as you recall from a couple years ago when we did the Battle Creek Lake subwatershed feasibility study and some of these other lake subwatershed feasibility studies, there's a lot of suggestions, but of course we can't do them all at once, and there are things that we have to work on prioritizing and timing with other things that might be happening in the area. So it's just to kind of introduce you to these two creeks that are at risk and what things we can do to help continue to improve them and have those as considerations going forward. But none of these are strong recommendations for moving forward with, I think, immediately. So Tyler, I'll let you kind of take it from there, but yeah, why don't you go for it?
Sounds good.
Okay.
It's good to be here. It's been a few years, I think, since I've been at a board meeting, so it's good to be back. I am sharing my screen with you all. I don't know if anybody wants to give me confirmation that you can see it or not.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So yeah, like Brad said, I'm gonna walk through at a high level what we've done in the Jarvis and Fish Creek subwatershed feasibility studies, and then I'll jump into the project prioritization tool and framework that we've developed as well. So we'll kick it off with the Jarvis Creek feasibility study. After completing all the impaired and at-risk lake feasibility studies, we shifted our focus to two of the at-risk creeks in the district. That's Jarvis Creek and Fish Creek. Both creeks are at risk for nutrient impairment, and additionally, both of them have pretty high concentrations of chloride in the creeks, and that's based on the past several years of monitoring data that the district has done. So both of these studies were primarily desktop evaluations of the watersheds to look for BMP retrofit opportunities or other water quality improvement projects. We also conducted field investigations of sites that we identified through the desktop analysis to narrow down our selections and rule out sites that had any red flags or design inhibitors that weren't visible in the desktop review, but when we were in the field, kind of ruled the projects out. And then after selecting the appropriate sites, we performed high-level conceptual designs for each alternatives, and then additionally performed preliminary cost estimates for the alternatives and calculated the cost efficiencies for nutrient removal. So first I'll just go over the opportunities we identified in the Jarvis Creek subwatershed. Mainly these are a lot of rain gardens located at either light industrial areas, quite a few of them around the Owasso Basin area, and then there's a rain garden located at a park east of the highway that runs through right the middle of the watershed. And then there's also a rain garden or infiltration basin located in the manufactured home park at the southwest corner of the watershed. I'll mention that we coordinated with the folks working on the Owasso Basin flood mitigation study to identify opportunities to cross-sell potentially one of the flood mitigation alternatives that they were looking at as also a water quality improvement opportunity. And one of those that we identified was associated with the proposed berm and storage along the biking and green corridor to the west of Owasso Basin, where it's proposed that a berm would be constructed along the bike path to divert flows from the west industrial area around Owasso Basin and directly into Jarvis Creek. And in the field, we identified that there is an open parcel located at that corner. And so we evaluated what sort of water quality improvement and benefit we would get from constructing additional flood storage in the form of a stormwater control pond there. And I'll show some pictures of that. So this is just a map that was included in the memo of all of the different alternatives you'll see that quite a few of them are located in this industrial area just south of Owasso Basin. There's a rain garden here associated with this property, and then another rain garden here associated with this property. One thing that was unique is that in the field, we actually saw that there was quite a bit of sediment loading on these properties. And so installing retrofit opportunities here would improve conditions maybe beyond what we would assume just based on existing conditions calculations in a water quality model, since we were seeing so much loading that was going untreated. This is an example of the schematic for the manufactured home park biofiltration basin. So it's capturing a lot of impervious area that would just be running almost directly into the storm sewer network north of this parcel, pretty untreated, but there's quite a bit of open area right at the end of the cul-de-sac there. And then this is a photo of the condition in that area, and then the basin would be located to the right here. This is an overview of that water quality opportunity I talked about that's associated with one of the Owasso Basin flood alternatives. So this dashed line is where the proposed berm is being evaluated at going, and then it would capture runoff from this whole light industrial area over here and direct it into this stormwater pond. And there's quite a significant water quality benefit. If this pond is constructed, it removes about 20 pounds of phosphorus a year, just because of the size of the pond and the amount of impervious that it's treating from this area. And then these are just some pictures of that vacant parcel that I mentioned. So this is looking east, and here's the bike path that runs north-south through that corridor. And then this is looking at the intersection of Owasso Boulevard and Spruce, northwest at that same parcel. And with that, I will jump to the Fish Creek study unless anybody has questions on the Jarvis Creek subwatershed study.
Taylor, if you want to go back to the previous picture of that intersection, you know, just want to further highlight, you know, when we had Sam and Matt Metzger and Aaron last month to talk about the Owasso area options, you heard a lot of discussion about this particular parcel, and you know, that being a part of a place where we can collect stormwater and route it around Owasso Basin at the same time, as Tyler is suggesting, treat it. It has that dual purpose that we were looking at. I think there was some discussion when we talked to the city about the option of actually moving it over to the, what is it, the Q3, the safety place that across the street, you know, kind of shifting areas. So looking into that as well. So in general, in this area, it's a nice opportunity to have dual purpose, both for the stormwater detention that we need and collection, and the water quality improvements to help for the area, the creek. Cliff?
In my travels around the country, I've noticed a few places where highway departments have made note of a chloride reduction zone or something along that line. And I'm not sure what exactly they're doing, but it's usually some enhanced type of or reduced chloride use along that section of highway. And I know it's probably really difficult in the urban area, especially along our freeways, to do much more than MnDOT's already currently doing. But I wonder if that's been thought of, and if that's the last part of the memo where you talk about the chloride issue. There's not a lot in there other than what's being done. But I wonder if anybody in BAR has kind of looked at that and what some other agencies are doing in terms of extraordinary chloride management beyond what's kind of required or promoted.
Yeah, we have several staff at BAR that are working really closely with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency on helping them with their chloride management strategies and coming out with new tools. We have finished helping them come up with a tool to further evaluate chloride source loading. So really pinpointing where chloride is coming from within a specific watershed. There's also a lot of model ordinance guidance from the MPCA that they can't necessarily enforce, but that's on local jurisdictions or cities to implement that would further the chloride management for road applicators, like you were mentioning, on more small scale thoroughfares, not necessarily the big highways that MnDOT is managing.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end of the memos, both Jarvis and Fish, I included some of that guidance from the MPCA. Another thing that they've been focusing on recently is not necessarily road salt application, but water softener salt reduction, and educating residents about their water softeners and salt use with those. And so that's been one of their big pushes in the last few years as well.
Yeah, the water softener use is primarily impacting the Mississippi River because we're all on central sewer here. But I was wondering whether or not there's some way that we can work with the jurisdictions to, because of our, you know, both these creeks are chloride impaired, or at least very close to it. If there's some kind of enhanced strategy, we might be able to try to convince people to follow. I don't know if it's worth pursuing, but I thought I just recalled seeing some of those signs along roadways that this is a I can't remember what they call it, but I think it was down in Kentucky or Tennessee that I saw it, but you know, it was a specific geographic area where they were trying to improve chloride management.
Yeah, that is something that we do talk to our cities about, or with the cities. We still participate in the salt symposium that's done every year. And there's some ideas and research and things coming out of there. I'd have to look and see what other states are doing or what that research has shown. But I know that we have some folks that are working on that as well. So we keep up research on that, and we'll continue to do that.
I had a comment question. I guess you kind of almost answered it there, which was a request really to keep up on the research. And to me, it seems like, we have this alum treatment facility where we pull phosphorus out. We were very experimental in doing that. It seems to me we could similarly put up a station where we direct water that's high in salt and put it through a facility that boils off the salt and then puts it in another thing and boils it down to salt again, puts it in a bin and reuse it for the next year. So I'm just throwing those ideas out and encourage you to keep up with the research.
I had a question for Tyler too. On both of these reports, you note when there's a challenge of working with private property owners. Have you talked to any of them prior to the report writing?
Not yet, no.
Wouldn't it maybe be a good idea to do that, to see if they were interested and to start talking up the idea?
So that's, it's the process.
Like a lot of work.
Yep. So normally the process that we've identified to work the best is to make sure that we're optimizing where treatment would best happen. So we're looking at that first, and then that prioritization tool comes into play, and then we can start talking with landowners.
Without getting them alarmed or anything before we pursue a project, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that process has worked really well in our targeted retrofit projects. It's nice to have a suite, and we've done our own prioritization. Now this tool helps us do that a little more holistically. But then Paige has used that for her contact and her soliciting of projects as she moves forward.
If I could interrupt one more comment. On both of these projects, and actually it's more applicable district-wide, but on page 3, there's a graph that shows over time the change in nutrient levels on both creeks. And what I've been thinking for a while, and is probably haven't expressed it clearly, but also for the lakes, is I'd like to see if we could create kind of a timeline. You're going over the years, and then, oh, here we did this project in the watershed, and here we did this project in the watershed, and see how it correlates to the changes in water quality. oftentimes I think we'll find that maybe it didn't have much impact on the end, the creek and the creek itself. But I think in lakes it probably would much more. But it's interesting to see it change over time and how it fluctuates up and down. And now, especially like in Jarvis Creek, nutrient levels are really down near the TP standard, whereas previously they've always been up very high. Well, what happened in the watershed to change that? And that's kind of what I'd like to see on these charts. Did we do something really major, or is it because it's fully developed and land use, there's no active erosion going on in the watershed or something like that? I think that'd be informative.
Somebody. Where's our presenter?
Yep.
There we go.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. Yes, Cliff, that would be interesting to see. And we would be able to graph that, on, like you said, on a timeline. So we could look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and Cliff, I agree with that. One of the things I'd like to see on these reports too is if we do one of these projects, how is it projected to change the loading on the body of water we're talking about?
Yeah.
We never quite show that. We show how things are, and then we say we're going to do this, but it isn't always clear to me what effect I should even expect out of that.
Yeah.
Tyler, do you want to speak to that? Or, I mean, we can do that.
I think we...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we calculate the estimated pollutant reduction, and in past years where projects have been within impaired watersheds, where there's actually TMDL reduction requirements, those modeled reductions equate exactly into what the reduction of the TMDL is going to be, and that's used in reporting. In these subwatersheds, there's not necessarily models created to estimate how concentrations in the creek might be reduced, but we are definitely calculating how the loads to the creek are being reduced.
And then we use that in a determination of what projects make most sense to move forward with too, based on that.
Yep. As well as the cost efficiency of that removal. So the cost per pound of phosphorus, if you will.
Okay, on the Fish Creek.
Great. Yeah, so similarly in Fish Creek, we use the same methodology to identify the different opportunities. One thing just of note is that Fish Creek is a lot less developed than Jarvis Creek and a lot less developed than many of the other subwatersheds in the district. It's primarily residential land use, with the Bailey Nursery being the other primary land use as ag and a little bit of commercial in their main building area, but primarily residential across the whole subwatershed. But we identified several opportunities to improve water quality, some being typical retrofit, so rain gardens, but also a few unique opportunities. Two of them being pond improvement projects. So the first is located on Carver Road that runs kind of right through the middle of the watershed. That's this project 4, and the ponds are located right here. I'll jump to this figure so you can see the direct area contributing to those ponds, but there's a series of 3 stormwater ponds that are connected by 2 culverts under that road. And while we were in the field, actually, we identified this as a potential opportunity to improve water quality in Fish Creek, because we saw that the runoff discharging from the northern pond, which connects almost directly to Fish Creek through storm sewer to the south off of this figure, was very green, and the ponds were highly eutrophic. And based on recent experience with research in stormwater ponds, some of which I have and some of which other staff at BAR have, and something that we've been tracking at BAR for the past few years really closely, is that when ponds become highly eutrophic, they might actually be acting opposite to what they were designed to do, which is retain phosphorus and nutrients, and rather release the nutrients, just because the ponds are have really low oxygen and aren't biologically or chemically able to retain phosphorus in the sediments like they're designed to do. And so we thought that these 3 ponds showed pretty good indicators that that might be the case. And so our recommendation would be to further evaluate what the sediment actually looks like in the ponds and determine if maybe a chemical treatment or some sort of designed filtration of the effluent would be an opportunity to significantly reduce phosphorus loading downstream into Fish Creek. Similarly, the other pond improvement project, actually, this is a picture of the effluent leaving those ponds. It runs through this ditch and then goes directly into storm sewer that discharges pretty close to the creek. So there's not much overland filtration at all of this pond effluent. And this is a picture of the pond. It's one of the ponds north of Carver Road itself. But the other pond that we identified is nicknamed Double Driveway Pond, and it's in the sort of center of the watershed, but all of the area you can see in this inset on the figure, which is primarily Bailey Nurseries, is tributary to this one pond. And the district has actually done several projects in this pond over the past couple decades, actually, including redesign of the outlet. The pond has been dredged several times, but while we were in the field, we noticed that there's a significant amount of sediment being deposited at the inlet of the pond, as well as most likely just because of the conditions of the pond, it may be releasing phosphorus and loading that downstream into Fish Creek. And so like the Carver ponds, we suggest examining what the pond sediments look like to determine if they're releasing phosphorus or not, but then also expanding the pond's permanent volume to provide even more storage and water quality benefit, and then removing that sediment buildup and then potentially constructing either a sediment forebay or installing hydrodynamic separators upstream of the pond to really reduce the intensity of sediment loading to the pond and reduce maintenance frequency and costs.
Question.
Yep.
Do you recall, Brad, if we have a permanent easement for that pond?
My recollection is that there is an easement over the pond. I don't know if it's the city's or if we're named on that. I would have to look back.
I believe we are named. We are named on that.
We named on that?
We actually own part of the driveway that comes in, and then we can come down in there. Their driveway, the last time we dredged it out, I think 3 years ago.
Yeah.
We had that acquisition, the property up, just upstream where the double driveway is at, and we've probably cleaned that out 3, maybe 4 times since it was built as a part of the original Fish Creek project. It collects a lot of sediment, and I think we've walked from the double driveway pond upstream to Bailey Nursery, and my recollection, and Tyler, you might be able to add more detail to this, but Bailey has such a huge agricultural operation there, where there's a lot of crushed rock and class 5 and things that would generate fine sediments that would run off, and they tend to make their way down into this double driveway pond and settle out, and so it does tend to accumulate quite a bit. I think there are some spots along the creek just upstream of the double driveway pond too that we've identified as eroding, but the private property owner had resisted us going in and repairing those. If you recall, Cliff, on us staying out of there.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, you can see in this picture, this is apparently the amount of sediment that's been accumulating over just 3 years in the pond, and the rest of the pond is pretty shallow as well. This is the inlet right here, and then the outlets across the picture over here. So that's another opportunity. one kind of unique opportunity we identified in this subwatershed is a swale filtration berm. This is a technology that's been piloted by the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory. We're proposing that it would be located downstream of a commercial property where there's not a lot of room to develop sort of a typical biofiltration basin, but there's a lot of contributing impervious area. And so could be a unique opportunity to install sort of a new technology and offer partnership opportunities with the university as well if they're interested and if the district is interested. It essentially acts the same as an iron enhanced bench or any iron enhanced sand filter, but it's pooled water behind a berm that slowly filters rather than water filtering through a trench and an underdrain in a basin.
Is that a misspelling on the diagram? It says an impermeable liner on the upstream side of that sand layer. Wouldn't you want that to permeate through there?
I think the impermeable liner just lines the bottom here so that water doesn't undercut the filtration media.
So it's meant to flow through that entire vertical column.
Yep, so there's riprap on either side that form the slopes, and then the riprap is really porous and filters through this sand. And
I think it sounds like a neat idea.
And the laboratory has published results that say it has similar removals to what you would sort of expect with an iron enhanced sand filter. Another sort of highlight that we made in this memo is that the district has obviously been doing routine monitoring on Fish Creek for erosion, and they have marked several locations where it would be prudent to monitor erosion so that it doesn't worsen. And so we just recommend continuing that monitoring so that these sites, if they do get worse, can be repaired in a timely fashion so as not to increase sediment and then any associated nutrient loading downstream in the creek below the 494 crossing. And then there are just some examples of where the bank has decently eroded. And then here's an undercutting example as well. And this was from the 2018 monitoring effort. And then the last image sort of I have is the chloride management guidance that we had talked about. So I don't know if we need to spend any more time on that, but this is the document actually from the MPCA, but this guidance was synthesized and included in both of the memos for the board's consideration.
I have a question.
Yep.
On your first project, the Pleasant View Park rain garden, can you show me on the map how that's connected to Fish Creek, or just explain it?
Let me zoom in right here.
Yeah.
So Pleasant View Park, there's storm sewer that actually runs at the end of this cul-de-sac and then connects to this pond over here, which then runs down here and connects to Fish Creek on the west side of 494.
Thanks.
Yep. It's right, yeah, it's right at the edge of the subwatershed.
So that to me would seem like a lower priority because it's got such a distance of flow to the creek that I would think its impact of reducing nutrients in a rain garden would probably be negated by the time it got to Fish Creek. That's my opinion. But.
Yeah, one of the benefits is just the educational and visibility opportunity for the district at the park.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good location.
Yep. If there aren't any other questions, we can move on to the prioritization study.
Go ahead. So
to give more of a high level overview of the goals of this project and tool development, this study stemmed from a lot of work that the district has done in the past in identifying water quality improvement opportunities and retrofit projects through subwatershed feasibility studies like the ones we just went through. And in addition to the completion of the Beltline resiliency study, dozens of flood risk areas and flood mitigation projects have been identified through that as well. And so the goal of this project was to develop an objective tool to assess all of these different types of projects using criteria to set priorities based on the district's water management plan goals, and especially where projects have co-benefits and are meeting multiple district goals. So the first step of this tool was development of data aggregation and review of all of the data that the district had on past projects that it has implemented. That meant compiling information related to the district's past identification efforts, like the church, school, and faith-based site search projects. Like I said, these sub-watershed feasibility studies, the flood area prioritization framework as part of the Beltline resiliency study. And we also reviewed a lot of examples from other metro watershed districts and cities where they've developed similar prioritization frameworks. And from this review, we created quite a laundry list of different criteria and qualifications that we could apply to projects and by which the projects could be ranked. And from there, we reviewed the district's plan and strategic overview to provide sort of an overarching framework for the prioritization strategy that aligns with the action items and the goals of the plan, which are to achieve surface water quality, achieve healthy ecosystems, manage risk of flooding, support sustainable groundwater, inform and empower communities, and manage the organization effectively. So those were sort of the 6 buckets that we grouped all of our criteria into. And we also compared those goals with the Envision sustainability framework. If you're familiar with that, that's a framework that evaluates project components such as life cycle, community engagement, and project sustainability. So yeah, like I said, we put our laundry list of criteria and sorted that into the different goal categories and assigned specific scoring schemes to each criteria. So for example, if a project is within an impaired watershed, it gets a score of 1, and if it's not, it gets a score of 0. And then we also assigned different weights to each of the criteria to boost the scores of criteria that were deemed to be more important or should carry more weight when developing the project ranking. So in this example, we assigned a weight of 2 to the impaired watershed criteria because these projects are going to help meet TMDL goals versus a project not in an impaired watershed. So each criteria score is then multiplied by its weight, and then these composite scores are summed for an entire project. And then those summation of all of those scores are what are used to rank the projects overall. There were several iterations of all of the criteria and scoring and weighting systems based on internal bar staff feedback, as well as meetings with the district staff and gathering their feedback. Where we're at right now is we've incorporated the latest round of district staff feedback into the tool. And we've also loaded a bunch of water quality projects and flooding projects into the tool to see how everything shakes out. And this includes projects that have already been selected for next steps or are already implemented to sort of calibrate the tool, if you will, to see where everything lands in terms of priorities that have already been established. And preliminary results of the tool are showing that the criteria and the scoring systems that have been set are producing the expected results, and that it's really highlighting projects that have already been determined to be a priority by the district. And so that's a good sign that can make us confident that this tool is going to produce similar results in the past, but also be objective when we're adding projects in the future. And so on the screen, you can just see a couple of examples of projects that are in the tool. 2 of them are flood areas that were identified in the Beltline resiliency study. And then one is the Target BMP retrofits project that was already designed. And so we know that one had moved forward. And then the I-94, 494, and 694 water quality project was identified as part of the Battle Creek Lake feasibility study. And so you can see that the 6 district goals, water quality, flooding, et cetera, all have their own subscore, but then each score is summed to provide the ultimate rank for these projects. And so of the 70 or so projects we have in the tool right now, you can see the Target BMP retrofits project ranked 5th, whereas the flood area in Coleman Creek, south of County Road CE, ranked 35th. And then I also have a map of all of the projects that are currently in the tool right now. And you can see that it's quite a bit, but it's definitely not a comprehensive list of all the potential projects that the district has on its plate. And so next steps include loading more projects into the tool and further refining any of the weights or criteria based on any further district staff comments or board comments on that.
I think it's an impressive tool. I like it. Something that we've talked about for years, so I'm glad to see it put together. I have two comments on the weighting side of it. One was the weight of 2 on the internal load pieces. I thought that might give some strong preference to internal load projects. And I was wondering if you could explain how the staff kind of all came around to supporting that.
Yeah, I can provide the initial assumptions that we made, and then maybe Tina can comment on the staff's opinion. But we included those criteria specifically because internal load reduction projects are sometimes important parts of TMDLs. And with the tool as it was in its very first iteration, those projects were at the bottom of the list just because they don't have natural resources benefit, they don't have any flooding benefit, they're only water quality improvement. And so we added the weight initially just to give them more presence on the list so that they wouldn't just be the bottom projects and only have like 1 or 2 points every time.
Yeah, when in fact they might be a critical element of a TMDL effort.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. The other comment I had was in relationship to the items related to community criteria. Does the project involve leadership opportunities for community members? Does the project foster collaborative efforts with city watershed management organizations? Those kinds of issues. And they were a factor of 0.5 or 0.25 when we've been really pushing those issues for those elements in the last few years to try to really increase collaboration and educational opportunities. I was wondering why those were given a lower weighting.
Yeah, I think we were trying to normalize to a score of 1 just to keep that subcategory overall score equal with the rest of the goals. But that's definitely something that can be discussed and giving it a higher weight if the board or the staff determine that that is really important in a project. None of these are final, so.
Yeah, it'll come out as we start comparing the weightings of all these different projects. And
right.
If one is a real community effort that we see is ranked really low, we can question how that came about.
Yep.
And maybe those criteria would be evaluated. Yeah. I saw that you corrected the scoring that related to pounds of total TMDL reduction goal, number of pounds. There's a table you had in our board packet included the pounds up in the total score unweighted.
Oh,
I saw that you corrected that. Which I was going to point that out. It didn't seem appropriate. But
right.
Good.
I just had a quick comment and a reiteration of what Cliff just said. Well, first, Tyler, thank you for that presentation. That was, for me, perhaps one of the most exciting and awesome presentations I've seen at the Watershed District since perhaps maybe like 5 years ago, a colleague of yours gave a presentation on groundwater that I really liked. So I just want you to know I really enjoyed that. And then I kind of want to like keep in mind that criterion score that you're using in the model. And I think it'd be good for the board to, like, every time we talk about this, have that criteria so we can think about it, because the board might have input on what we might weight as more important than what you've decided. Maybe not, probably not, because you're basing it on our plan. But I just think that for me, at least, it would be helpful to just, every time we talk about this, to see here's what the criteria were and the scores we were giving within this model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that would be good to do anytime we're proposing a project to move forward, that we share how it ranked and how it came to that score.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
I have a question. First about process, is this a final thing or do we get input in it? And what's kind of the plan for developing it and using it?
Yeah, so this is still draft. It's probably going to be a living document for as long as it's live and being used. It certainly is open for input from the board. That's why we wanted to bring it to you tonight. So if you have input that you'd like to share with us after the meeting, that'd be fine as well. And any comments tonight we'll take.
Well, what would be best? I've got a number of just like clarification questions on definitions and some comments about weighting and maybe things that were left out. So what would be best?
I guess you're fine giving them tonight if you'd like to do that.
Okay, on table 2, you've got protect wetlands or restore wetlands. Above it, you have preserve habitat. Should we also have a category for restoring habitat?
Yeah, we could include that category. Pretty recently, actually, we were talking with Bill about a lot of these natural resources criteria and just the language around them and whether we should include as much detail as we have or if we should synthesize some of these categories. So those are pretty, I would say, more draft than other criteria, but if we do keep the protect habitat, then yeah, we could include a restore habitat criteria as well.
Yeah, I was just looking at kind of the parallel criteria and wanting them to match up. On the wetland restoration size, I like that it's broken down, and I should start with, I really agree with Cliff and Pam. I love having this kind of thing. It'll allow us to be more consistent and articulate the reasons for our decisions better, so that's great. But back to the detail on the wetland restoration size, there's a lot of difference between 5 and 40 acres. Should we maybe add a few more grades in there?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. That was based off of some work that BAR staff had done with the wetland site identification and restoration opportunities. And so that's just where we had pulled that from. But yeah, we can definitely add more scale in there.
We could add more, or we could just say 5+.
Sure, yep.
If we didn't want to.
I would think something that's 40 is something that would give us a lot more benefit than something 10 or 15. So if you're going to have a scale, let's even it out a little more.
Yeah, the fact is the chances we'll see anything over 5 acres of restoration is probably pretty small.
Right.
Then
in our district.
We need to see the list of what we've got on those wetlands you've looked at. I didn't have that background.
No.
Something you noted in the Fish Creek and Jarvis Creek discussion reports was if the area was in a high public traffic area, and saying that that was a positive criteria. So I think either in the natural resources restoration or in table 5, it would be good to add that.
Yeah, there are some criteria related to visibility and education opportunities. And I think that's what that is getting at with and that's one of the Envision tool sustainability framework criteria. And that relates really closely with the district's goal number 6 of managing the organization and really improving community involvement.
Okay. In table 5, you've got, is there a planned education component? And I would just do a little wordsmithing of could there be? There might not be one yet, but if it has potential, then I think it should qualify. The next thing is, does the project improve community existing conditions? What does that mean?
That's a good question. What we had sort of identified originally is, does it make the community more attractive either for residents or for business owners to either come there or purchase property there. We can definitely expand the language around that to be more specific, but it was pretty broad just for those more holistic projects that might not necessarily be a rain garden tucked in a corner somewhere, but be really more of a community project.
Kind of like when an assessor's valuing a property, they'd give extra value for something. Okay, maybe you can define it a little bit.
Yep.
Same question on, does the project enhance public health and safety? What does that mean?
If it's, I guess it's more getting at if the project is reducing some sort of risk to public health or safety. So for example, a lot of our flooding mitigation projects are reducing public health risks. So I think that wording, yeah, could be clearer in saying, is it reducing risk rather than enhancing safety?
Yeah, maybe that flip side would be a little more clear. I know we love public art, but it's not in our mission, so I don't think it should get a point. It maybe is combined up with the education component to draw attention to a project. And then in the last, well, two more, another definition question. What's a stakeholder in the stakeholder engagement at the bottom of the page? Who
that
is
could be a city or a property owner or a resident.
A big group.
And then on the table 6, the last thing on land ownership, you've got a point for public, a point or a half point for willing, and none for private. So do you mean a half point if a private property owner is willing and 0 if they're not?
More so if we know that a private owner is willing to partner on a project, but if we don't necessarily know anything about their willingness, then it doesn't get a point.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Diane. Good comments.
So I would assume that this is a living document in terms of if we make plan amendments, those criteria would change as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. We would reevaluate that with any changes to the plan.
Well, as we use it, I think that'll, you know, like I said before, we'll be able to see how it works and weigh everything. It'll be great.
Do we have any criteria in there for public demand for projects, say whether it's a water body that the public is noticing is bad or flooding conditions that they want addressed?
There isn't. That is a good addition. I think that would be valuable to at least capture in the tool.
What was the, I'm sorry, what was the comment?
Responding to a public demand or public request.
Oh.
Yeah, the community stuff is kind of passive in a way, but there, as you all know, there are a lot of things that the public is interested in that may change the rating on some projects.
That should also be reflected in plan amendments, at least on periodic intervals, but yeah.
The other thing, just a question, is that obviously you've gone through quite a few projects on this. Do we have access to look at the table for all these projects?
Yeah, we can send that out, or we can put it on a share site so that as it's updated, you can see it.
Yeah, I'd like to look through it because the comment was made that a number of projects that are either being implemented or have been implemented were evaluated to put in along with potential future projects. I'd like to take a look at them and see how some of these projects shake out in the table.
Yeah, we can share that with you.
Okay. And I also think it's a very good tool to use to put things together. I'm a little nervous, I have to say, about ranking things specifically, but other than that, I think it's a great tool to use.
Yeah, I think the ranking is, and the way we'll use this is it's not like we would just go for number one only. You know, we would take maybe the top projects in a specific category and pursue those and see how they, you know, what we can accomplish in that.
That was more where my thinking was going, to say we have A projects, B projects, and C projects or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions on the presentation? Is our presenter still here?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Are you finished?
I am done. If there are no more questions.
You're done too. All right, shall we move on?
Yes, thank you very much, Tyler.
Yep.
Pardon me?
I have just one question. What happens next?
So we're gonna take some of the feedback that we got tonight and we'll make some adjustments. Like Tyler said, we're still working internally as staff too to fine tune some of these things, and then we'll send it to you again so you can see it, and I'll send the table to you also so you can review those older projects as well.
Okay, and is there going to be anything done on the Fish Creek and the Jarvis Creek? Are they going to, are we pursuing these things more? I'm just curious.
Nope. So those studies, like some of the other sub-watershed analysis, will be the studies are finalized or will be based on our discussion tonight and any other comments from staff. And then those projects will go into the tool, and then we'll pursue each year. We pursue our targeted retrofits and stewardship grant program projects. And then it's also a good tool for if we have a city or a landowner that approaches us, we can see how that's already been assessed or determined by the staff.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Specific to the Fish Creek study, Dave, I haven't talked to Greg Nelson lately, but I know at one point there was a discussion about cleaning out the double driveway pond as a part of the CIP 2021. Do you know where those discussions have landed recently?
Compared to past years, we were going to wait probably another year or two, but it's getting close again. Yes.
Okay. So that one, at least, Larry, we're watching more closely because it has been a routine monitoring spot over the years. And
we check that one every year when we go do our routine stuff. That's definitely one that we make sure we take a picture of and whatnot.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina, where are we? Hello?
Administrators.
All right, we're moving to the administrator's report.
Yes, we are. I have meetings attended in the upcoming meetings. Just a reminder for those of you that were registered for the Water Resource Conference that's coming up in a couple weeks, you should be getting some notifications about how to access that information next week. I just also was on a call today regarding the MOD annual meeting, and so virtual planning process is coming along. Again, that'll be in the beginning of December. It'll all be virtual as well. No trip to Alexandria in the snow this year.
Yeah, all fun and games.
We got a notice about the Metro MOD meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the same day as the
Water Resource Conference.
This is yeah.
That evening.
Does he know that that's like all day long from the time you wake up in the morning and the time you go to sleep at night?
Yeah, it always lands on that same week, and he never changes the date. So
okay, got it.
It'll be a long day if you want to attend both of them.
Okay, next, project and program status reports.
Nope, I had a few more things in the admin report yet.
Okay.
So I had the budget status information. Was there any questions or comments about that?
No, I found it interesting about the mileage and the cleaning fees,
Yeah.
but not unusual.
just some different things this year that we're dealing with. And like I said, I'll take a closer look at that as we get into December for next year's budget as well.
And the CAC bylaws, I'm assuming Cliff is on top of that.
Yeah, let's go to the, you want to do the bylaws first or the Research Council update?
Well, is there any questions on the Research Council update?
No.
I suggested to Tina that we include it. It's a good summary of what's happened in the past and what's going forward in the future.
Larry and Diane have their hands up. Diane, you want to go first?
Yeah, my question was about the amount. It looks like the pooled funds from all the watersheds and the cities that are contributing and Bar and everybody is 115,000 currently.
It was, yep, it was last year.
Of that, 25 is what we contributed.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So why are we contributing such a big amount? Not that I'm
well, the fact that
but what is
most of the watershed districts are contributing most of that money. The cities, some of the cities in the hundreds, not in the thousands. But the watershed districts are the big beneficiaries of this information. I mean, much more than other people. We implement more projects. We propose more innovative approaches. So we're the ones that really are promoting this happening, and it's beneficial to us.
There's 6 or 7. Are we the biggest or what? Just
no, the top 3. So Capital Region, Mississippi, WMO, and us all contribute at the $25,000.
Okay, thanks.
And they're hoping to raise this contribution level to $150,000 next year.
Is the state still going to contribute this? Their 1.5 million next year?
I assume so.
Good.
No way of knowing for sure, but
yeah.
Yeah, that was a big plus for this program. I mean, without that support, it wouldn't be accomplishing nearly as much.
Thanks.
If we put in another $10,000, are we asking the other watershed districts to match that too?
Yeah, actually, that is what Cliff is proposing, and I suggested that he bring that up at the Metro Mod meeting as a.
Okay. Yeah, that's good, because right now we're 22% of the budget. So I'd like to see the other watershed district, because I agree with you, Cliff. Everybody benefits from this.
Yeah.
The other question that I had was, you said there were a list of projects that were unfunded. So if we get an extra, say, $40,000, do we have an idea what that's going to allow them to do?
Well, what their process is that they do actual requests for proposals. And so when they know how much money they have, they request the proposals. They have an elaborate process on review and recommendation and paring down those to a final selected few that fit within the budget. So even though last year there was probably 30 proposals that didn't get funded, they don't go back and fund those if they get more money. They have to resubmit it the next year if they want to consider it again for funding.
So as a consensus, if I show 35,000 for the Research Council in our budget, it won't change that budget line item. I'll take 10,000 from the contingency that's already built into that budget line item.
Yep.
Is that
good?
Nod of heads, yes. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next is the CAC bylaws update. Yeah, Cliff, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I can comment on that. As it said, the bylaws were initially adopted back in 2013-14 when the CAC was reconstituted, and they haven't been looked at too much since then. So there were a number of areas, particularly regarding getting more diversity within the board members, selected both from communities and the community, as well as diversity amongst gender and ethnicity. So that was taken into account, and we've did a number of iterations on revisions, and actually used Lauren a little bit to help rewrite part of that in correct language, and came up with the proposal here. I was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't a cross out underline.
Yeah, I
version,
apologize.
But
when I put it into PDF, it did the final version instead of the cross out.
oh, yeah. But I hope you had a chance to read it, and I think it reads pretty well. Any comments? I can try to answer.
Yeah, I had a couple. Do we have a list of who's on the CAC and how they fit into those categories that are there?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
And how would I get that?
Well, Carrie would. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Tina
can provide
Carrie.
that to you. Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Right now, there are a number of areas that don't have Darren filled. And so there's going to be an effort to reach out to some of those communities and get appointees to fill those selected areas. And then also I was trying to push for the board to actually approve the membership each year, like the bylaws say. So at our annual meeting, Tina will present that list to us every year. So it says, here's who is designated to be on the board, the types of member, and here's the people that are filling those positions, and then request that the board actually annually appoint those members to the CAC. So I could get a little better process.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what we'll do moving forward.
Is that what the bylaws say?
Yes.
They said once you were appointed, you were on forever unless you not to be on. I misread it. Huh?
No, it says that the membership would be submitted to the board for approval at the annual meeting. So
yeah, and that doesn't mean that we would have new people every time. It's just I would submit the membership list, and anybody that had been asked to not be on it, we would take off, and then any new members we would add for your approval as well.
If I may, 103D.331 is the statute for the advisory committee, and it actually does say the managers will annually appoint. And it also really does outline kind of the geographic type of members, one from each soil and water district and so forth. So I think our bylaws probably mirror that to the extent possible. It even says something about a sporting organization and a farm organization.
I know.
The farm.
Those are suggestions, and we don't have to, but I mean, I think what we're looking at is probably mirroring the statute pretty consistently.
It does. It reflects the fact that we're an urban district more than a rural district. So, and the Board of Water and Soil Resources really pretty much just says they just want a committee. They don't really care what it's composed of or who's on it. They just want a citizen advisory committee as the statutes require.
Right.
Okay, the question I had, and this is what I read in here, was it said the members will automatically be reappointed unless the board of the CAC wish to remove a member or a member wishes to resign.
Yeah, that could maybe be worded a little more clearly, so that it's clear that there's no term limits or term for the CAC members, that they can continue to be on it as long as they're active participants on the committee.
What'll happen is their name will reappear when it's up for appointment again. So they are continuing, it's just they're reappointed every year.
It could be like at the annual meeting where you do the slate of officers, you do the slate of the committee, the CAC.
That's correct.
The word that I was more focusing on was the word automatically.
Yeah, I agree that that's probably should be changed.
Yeah, I would agree. I would take out that. I would take out automatically. I would agree with that.
And how do we approach getting more diversity on the board if everybody that's on the board decides to stay on the board?
Yeah, well, right now we have lower membership than what.
Started an event 11 days ago. What seems to have been a super spreader event for seniors.
Oh, some of the other TV on?
Something. Yeah, right now we have lower membership, so we're needing to ramp up our membership. Lauren is going to be working through a process for reaching out to the different communities where we don't have representation. You know, there's a lot of different ways that we can approach this. It speaks a lot to the next item about the equity and inclusion process and just how our whole process is set up and our policies. And so it's kind of all fits together but for this go around, Lauren's looking at a process for reaching out to those communities and also community based groups that have membership that we can solicit for interest.
Okay. How many people are on the CAC right now?
I think right now, Cliff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but about 9, I think, are on.
Like 9 or 10 are pretty active. There's a number of other, there's probably 3 or 4 other appointed members, but they don't show up at every meeting.
Okay.
About a dozen.
I can send out the cross out version too, so you can see what was actually changed.
Because it says we have a minimum of 12 people, and that's why.
So I guess I would move we approve the minutes with the modification of adjusting the language around automatic.
The bylaws.
Maybe Tina can work on that with Lauren and we can approve that and get that sent back to the CAC.
Yeah, I can make changes and then bring it back to you next month if you want to see it again as well.
Okay.
We need a second.
I'll second. This is Pam.
Discussion? Otherwise we'll vote. Tina?
Larry?
Aye, I guess.
Diane?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Marge?
Aye. Is there anything else that we have to approve?
So we have discussion item, another discussion item for the equity inclusion consultant.
Okay.
It was a lengthy proposal and I had some thoughts ahead of that. So I just wanted to open that up for discussion with the board. I have heard from you as we talked about our stewardship grant program and equity areas for programming and staff. We've talked a lot about staffing and being able to work towards having a more diverse staff. So this is a continuation or an effort to really work on that road. I was impressed by the consultant's proposal. I thought the price was a little higher than I expected to see, but like I mentioned in my write-up, this is long-term work. This is a commitment, and we want to make sure that we have a good consultant that we're working with. And like I said, this one, AmazeWorks, came highly recommended to us, and it's not the same one that Capital Region has worked with. That's another one that Lauren's in communication with to get some ideas from them as well. So,
well, I guess I'll speak up first. I really support moving forward with this kind of a direction, but I agree we should have a few more proposals and decide who we work with. But I kind of look at this as similar to the whole controversy around police reform. I've always looked at more diversity in the workplace as a great thing, but then how do you do it? And police reform is kind of the same way. Everybody thinks we should have some reforms, but how do you institute it and how do you get it in the culture of the organization? So I think somebody with some real experience, like one of these consultants, is something that would really help the district. I think in going through the proposal, I like it, except the latter pieces of continuing work and staff workshops and all that going on. I don't think may not be necessary. It depends how the earlier stuff goes, but I think the earlier work, the training and discussion and focus groups is probably really important.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Cliff. I'd like to see more than just one proposal. And they're $200 an hour with a lot of extended work.
Right.
Anne, you had some comments?
I was just going to say, I agree. I know of other organizations who've used the IDI in a similar process and really thought it was beneficial. And so if we can get a couple more, maybe we can just decide what elements we want and which one will be the best fit.
Good, thank you. Any other comments?
Anything else, Tina?
Yeah, I basically just wanted to get a reassurance from the board that you are comfortable with me continuing down this road and continuing to get some proposals like this so that we can consider that for our future. So if that's something that board is comfortable with, then I will continue down that road.
I'm comfortable with it, and I would like to see some other proposals. Are you you mentioned Capital District. Are you interacting with the other watershed districts as to what they're doing in this area or what experiences they've had?
Yeah, so I've had ongoing conversations with Capital Region and Mississippi WMO. Those are the only other two watersheds that I know that are doing this work like this. There's some other watersheds that we've been working with. I know Paige has met with some of the other cost share groups, or the other cost share staff at other watersheds, and how they're looking similarly like we have for equity in our cost share program. But this work with inclusion and diversity is more unique and seems to be mostly the 3 urban watersheds that are doing work.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Tina.
That's all I had for the administrator's report.
Projects and program status report. Should we go through those one by one, or should we open it up to the board to make comments in general on any one they choose?
And I think if anybody has any questions or comments, they can just pepper them in. Yes.
Any questions?
Let me page through here.
I had a couple of questions. When we supporting permeable pavement, do we have a component in there of maintaining that? Because I remember we had issues around our own parking lot. It was an issue of this stuff clogs up after a while, or at least the version that we had did. Do we work that into our consideration when we're supporting something that's putting in permeable pavement?
Yes, Paige, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So Larry, are you specifically looking at the Boys and Girls Club or?
Yep, that's the one I'm looking at.
Yeah. So for that one, the watershed district will do maintenance for 2 years. And then we've already talked specifically that site, they partner with the city a little bit on maintenance. So we feel a little bit better about that maintenance happening. But it's definitely something we talk about ahead of time and what they'll need and making sure they have the right equipment.
Okay.
Bring that up for sure. We have maintenance agreements with them as well for that.
Right, yep.
Refresh my memory, is the Boys and Girls Club a paver parking lot or asphalt?
Paver, yeah.
Yeah, and pavers don't clog as easily, so it's a much better choice, yeah.
Right, fair enough. I got a driveway like that.
Oh. I had a question on the Beltline Battle Creek Tunnel repair. It said, part of the paragraph is, these repairs will be completed and a comprehensive report provided this winter. We haven't actually seen how much repair is needed. Wouldn't we have to have a contract for that?
We will have a contract for that. It is a small amount. If you remember, Sam mentioned that a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Doing it in the winter. I think Tina, refreshed my memory how much we budgeted for that. I think it was a total of $75,000. That's my recollection, but it was in that $50,000 to $75,000 range for a few repairs that are in the invert that we noticed when we were down there during this inspection. And while they're not hugely expensive, they're probably more urgent than other ones that we had seen. So.
Okay, I knew we were doing inspection, but I didn't think we were moving forward with repairs. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions on any of these projects?
Yeah, I had one, just a clarification, somebody can tell me. In the lake studies, you talked about coring, taking coring samples. Just exactly what's going on when you do that.
Take a core out of the bottom of the lake, and it's analyzed for the different types of phosphorus that are there, and we're looking for, I guess the term is mobile phosphorus, phosphorus that can be released and be available. So you understand kind of the different types of phosphorus that you might have to control to improve your lake water quality. Tyler, you might want to add to that.
It helps us determine what we need to do for internal phosphorus loading controls in lakes.
Yeah, those are put into models where you can calculate the total amount of whatever treatment necessary.
Okay.
Does that help, Larry?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
I just had a comment on natural resources. I wanted to thank Bill and working with Sage and the whole crew for even going ahead and doing these temporary signs on the wildflowers. It not only is educational, but I think it will encourage people to plant some themselves. And it doesn't always have to be a fancy sign. These are paper, cardboard with some plastic covering, and people are reading them and learning from it. So I think it was really a good move.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, our feedback has been amazing, and a number of people that have commented on the signs and their appreciation about what we're doing out there and learning about the native plants. It's really working. Like you said, they're super simple, but they're effective.
And no good deed goes unpunished. I think you should just do more.
Well, that's from one of my favorite musicals too.
Yeah. I had a question in that same area in the natural resource report under wetland A, you have a graph of the water level. I was curious whether or not the grass lake has declined similarly.
Yes, it has. Yep. We've had, well, you may have seen, I think I saw what 8th driest year, or well, that was the month of September, I think, but we had a fairly dry year this year, and Grass Lake responded similarly.
Good.
Anybody's hand up, Tina?
I don't think so. Nope.
All right, let's move on to the report of managers. Cliff?
I would like to add a comment that I really like the annual report document.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say,
well done.
Good. Lauren put in a communications outreach program report this month, and she'll continue that now. And she worked really hard with a number of staff to produce that. And it took, I mean, it was a number of months more than it will be next year, because now we have a template and we can together. But
did you hear from Bowser?
Not yet, no.
Okay. I don't have anything under reports of managers.
Pam?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, no, nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay, Diane? Larry?
I just have one question. When we do the final budget for our December meeting, will that be published in like the Shoreview Press?
No, it won't. I mean, we don't typically do that. It's not a public hearing. We're not required to do a public hearing. That's when we would typically publish something. But it will be on our website, and I typically send that out to all of our cities as well for their information.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have nothing. The vice presidential debates are on, though.
Yes. My wife just said, ah.
Oh, they're bad.
No. A lot of interrupting again.
Oh, not again. Okay. Well, anyhow, is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Oh,
all right.
Seconds.
Enjoy, everybody.
Yes, have a good night. Good to see
night.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.